My son invited me to dinner with his wife's wealthy parents. Before we arrived, she whispered, "Please, don't mention you used to clean houses." I smiled. Halfway through dessert, I thanked her father for being so kind the day he sold me his company. His fork never touched the plate again. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got there. My name is Clara Hughes. I'm 68 years old, and I've been a widow for 2 years. I built 4 cleaning franchises from nothing, starting with a mop, a bucket, and a borrowed van back in 1982. 42 years of scrubbing floors, managing crews, and reinvesting every dollar I made. My late husband Tom and I lived modestly in our small house in Lake Forest, Illinois. We drove old cars, clipped coupons, and saved everything we could. Tom passed away from a heart attack in our kitchen on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before our 45th wedding anniversary. My son Brandon is 42. He's a real estate broker who married Natalie Morrison 3 years ago. Natalie comes from money, old money, the kind that builds wings on hospitals and has galas named after them. Her father, Gerald Morrison, owns Morrison & Sons, a commercial real estate development company that's been around since the 1950s. Her mother, Linda, is an interior designer who once redesigned the mayor's office and never let anyone forget it. From the moment Brandon brought Natalie home, I knew she looked at me differently. Not with warmth or curiosity, but with something closer to embarrassment. She'd smile tightly when I talked about my work, change the subject when I mentioned my cruise, and once, at a family barbecue, she actually steered me away from her friends before I could introduce myself. "Mom's just being shy," Brandon had said that day, laughing it off. I wasn't shy. I was being hidden. The invitation to dinner came on a Wednesday. Brandon called while I was reviewing payroll for my franchises. "Mom, Natalie's parents want to have dinner with us this Saturday. Something casual, just family. They're really looking forward to getting to know you better." I should have known something was wrong. Gerald and Linda Morrison had been my in-laws for 3 years, and they'd never once invited me anywhere. At Brandon and Natalie's wedding, Linda had greeted me with a handshake so brief I barely felt her fingers. Gerald had nodded from across the room and spent the entire reception talking to other developers. "That sounds lovely," I told Brandon. "What should I bring?" "Just yourself, Mom. Just be yourself." Except that's not what Natalie wanted at all. Saturday evening, Brandon picked me up in his Audi. Natalie was in the passenger seat, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Her perfume filled the car, something French and expensive. "You look nice, Clara," she said, glancing back at me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. You look beautiful." We drove through Lake Forest toward the Morrison estate in Lake Bluff, a sprawling property behind iron gates. Brandon made small talk about interest rates and housing inventory. I watched the trees pass by my window and thought about Tom. He would have hated this dinner. He never trusted people who valued appearances over character. As we turned onto the Morrisons' private drive, Natalie twisted in her seat to face me. "Clara, I need to ask you something." Her voice was sweet, but there was steel underneath. "Tonight is really important to us. My parents are very traditional, very particular about certain things." "Of course," I said. "So, I was thinking," she continued, her fingers playing with her pearl necklace, "maybe we just don't mention, your work history, the cleaning business and all that. It's just that my father is very old-fashioned about class and professions, and I'd hate for him to get the wrong impression of you." Brandon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He stared straight ahead. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "The wrong impression? You know what I mean." Natalie's laugh was brittle. "He might not understand how someone can go from scrubbing toilets to owning a business. He's very black and white about these things. I just want tonight to go smoothly." The wrong impression. As if 42 years of honest work was something shameful. As if the hands that had cleaned their homes, their offices, their buildings were too dirty to mention at their dinner table. "I understand," I said quietly. Brandon finally spoke. "Mom, she's just trying to—" I said I understand, Brandon. I smiled at Natalie. She smiled back, satisfied, and turned around. She had no idea what she'd just done. Neither of them did. The Morrison house wasn't a house, it was a statement. 3 stories of stone and glass, with columns framing the entrance, and a fountain in the circular driveway. A young man in a vest took Brandon's keys. We walked up marble steps, and Linda Morrison opened the door before we could knock. "Welcome, welcome!" She air-kissed Natalie's cheeks, hugged Brandon, and extended her hand to me. "Clara, so glad you could make it. Gerald is just finishing up some calls." The foyer had a chandelier that belonged in a hotel lobby. Our footsteps echoed on the marble. Linda led us through hallways lined with oil paintings and antique furniture. Everything gleamed. Everything was perfect. Everything was cold. We entered a dining room with a table that could seat 20. Tonight, it was set for 5. Crystal glasses caught the light from another chandelier. The china looked like it had never been used. Gerald Morrison stood at the head of the table, phone pressed to his ear. He was 74, tall, with silver hair and the kind of tan that comes from golf courses, not construction sites. He wore a navy blazer and an expression of permanent authority. He ended his call and turned to us. "Brandon, good to see you, son." They shook hands. He kissed Natalie's cheek. Then he looked at me. "Clara, thank you for joining us." His handshake was firm but brief, the kind that says, "I'm being polite." "Thank you for having me, Mr. Morrison. Please call me Gerald. We're family now." He gestured to the chairs. "Shall we?" Dinner was served by 2 staff members who moved silently around the table. The first course was some kind of soup with foam on top. I had no idea what I was eating, but I smiled and nodded when Linda explained it was a deconstructed French onion bisque. The conversation floated around me. Gerald talked about a development project in Evanston. Linda discussed a charity gala she was chairing. Natalie mentioned a vacation home they were considering in Aspen. Brandon laughed at all the right moments and agreed with everything Gerald said. I ate my soup and said nothing. I was furniture. Then Linda turned to me. "Clara, Brandon tells us you're retired now?" I set down my spoon. "Semi-retired. I still oversee my franchises, but I've got good managers in place." "Franchises," Linda repeated, as if tasting an unfamiliar word. "How entrepreneurial." "4 locations," I said. "Commercial cleaning. We handle office buildings, medical facilities, schools." Natalie's fork clinked against her plate. Brandon coughed. Gerald leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Commercial cleaning. That's quite a leap from where you started, I imagine." "It is," I said. "I started with 1 mop and 1 van in 1982. "Impressive." He didn't sound impressed. "Building a business from nothing takes a certain kind of person." "It takes work," I said simply. The main course arrived. Lamb chops with tiny vegetables arranged like art. The conversation shifted back to safe territory. Charity events, mutual acquaintances, people I'd never met. I cut my lamb and listened. Then dessert came. Some kind of chocolate thing with gold leaf on top. I took 1 bite and set down my fork. "This is delicious," I said. "Gerald, Linda, thank you so much for this beautiful evening. It reminds me of something." Natalie's eyes went wide. Brandon froze. "It reminds me of a party I worked about 30 years ago. 1994, I think. Maybe early 1995. Gerald's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I was cleaning a mansion in Lake Bluff. Big party, maybe 200 people. Waiters everywhere, champagne towers, a jazz band. I was on the crew that cleaned up after midnight." Linda dabbed her mouth with her napkin. "How interesting. The house belonged to a developer," I continued. "I remember because he kept talking on the phone in his study while we cleaned around him. He was nervous about something. I remember he kept saying, 'The building is fine. The paperwork is fine. No one's going to check.'" Gerald's fork never made it to his mouth. He set it down slowly, deliberately, his eyes locked on mine. "I never forgot that party," I said, my voice steady. "Because 6 months later, that same developer paid me $12,000 in cash for my little cleaning business. Said he was helping me out, investing in small businesses. I used that money to buy my first franchise." The silence in that dining room was absolute. Even the staff had stopped moving. "Gerald," I said, looking directly at him, "I've always wanted to thank you properly for being so kind to me that day. For believing in me when I was just a woman with a mop. You sold me that business for $12,000, and I built my entire life on it." His face had gone white, Linda was staring at him. Natalie's mouth was open. Brandon was gripping his napkin so hard his knuckles were white. Gerald Morrison hadn't sold me anything. He'd paid me to go away because I'd overheard something I shouldn't have. Something about a building with problems, paperwork that wasn't quite right, inspections that didn't happen. He'd thought he was buying my silence with $12,000 and a story about believing in small businesses. He had no idea I'd kept every receipt, every document, every record from that transaction. He had no idea I'd spent 30 years wondering what he'd been so desperate to hide. And now, sitting at his table with his daughter glaring at me for being an embarrassment, I finally understood. I smiled. "Thank you again for this lovely dinner." Gerald's fork never touched his plate again. The ride home was silent. Brandon's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I could see the tendons standing out. Natalie stared out her window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. No one spoke until we pulled into my driveway. "Mom!" Brandon's voice was tight. "What the hell was that?" I gathered my purse. "That was dinner with family. You embarrassed us." Natalie twisted in her seat, and now the sweetness was completely gone. "You made my father look like a criminal in front of everyone." I thanked him for his kindness, I said calmly. Was I lying? "You know exactly what you did." Her face was flushed, angry. "You implied something terrible about him, and for what? Because I asked you to be discreet about your past?" My past. I let the words sit there. My past is the reason I have anything. My past is 42 years of work you find embarrassing. Brandon turned in his seat. "Mom, please. Natalie's family is important to us. Her father has connections, opportunities. I can't have you." "You can't have me what, Brandon? Tell the truth? Exist?" That's not what I meant. But his eyes said otherwise. I opened the car door. "Thank you for the ride. Good night." "Mom, wait." I closed the door and walked to my house without looking back. Inside, I leaned against the closed door and waited for my hands to stop shaking. Tom's photo sat on the mantel, his smile forever frozen at 66. "They don't know who they're dealing with," I whispered to him. My phone rang at 7 the next morning. "Brandon, Mom, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "Not on the phone. I'm coming over. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Natalie was coming too. I made coffee and waited. When they arrived, Natalie walked in like she owned the place, taking in my worn furniture, my outdated kitchen, my life. Brandon looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. "Mom, sit down." Brandon gestured to my own couch. I remained standing. "I'm fine here." Natalie crossed her arms. "Clara, we need to discuss your behavior last night." "My behavior?" "Yes. What you said to my father was completely inappropriate. You made vague accusations that could damage his reputation." "I made no accusations. I stated facts. You implied he did something wrong." Her voice was rising. "You practically called him corrupt in front of his wife in his own home." "Did I?" I looked at Brandon. "Did you hear me call anyone corrupt?" He rubbed his face. "Mom, the implication was clear. Gerald looked like he'd seen a ghost. Linda spent an hour after you left interrogating him about that building, that payment, all of it. Good, I thought. Let her interrogate." "There's something else," Brandon said. He pulled out his phone, scrolled, and showed me the screen. It was an email from Gerald Morrison to Brandon. The subject line read, "Family situation, urgent." I scanned the email. My stomach went cold. "Brandon, we need to discuss your mother's stability. Linda and I are concerned about her mental state based on last night's dinner. She made serious accusations without basis and seemed confused about events from decades ago. Given her age, we think it might be time to consider getting her evaluated. We've consulted with our attorney about options for ensuring she doesn't harm herself or others with false allegations. Let's meet this week. We want to help." I read it twice. Then I looked at my son. "You're showing me this because I wanted you to see what you've started." Brandon's voice cracked. "Gerald is talking about having you evaluated, Mom. Competency hearings. He's using words like elder abuse prevention and protective measures. He's threatening me. He's protecting himself. Brandon stood up, pacing. You walked into his house and basically accused him of bribery or fraud or God knows what. What did you think would happen? I thought I'd tell the truth. Natalie stepped closer. The truth is, you're a bitter old woman who can't stand that your son married up. You wanted to ruin dinner because you're jealous of what we have. The slap of her words hung in the air. Natalie. Brandon's voice was a warning, but she wasn't done. You want Brandon to feel guilty for having a better life than you did. You want him to stay stuck in your sad little world of mops and buckets. Well, he's not. He's better than that. We're better than that. I looked at my son. Is that what you think? He wouldn't meet my eyes. I think you need to apologize to Gerald and Linda. I think you need to drop whatever conspiracy theory you've built up in your head. And I think... He took a breath. I think maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist. Someone who can help you with these paranoid thoughts. Paranoid. Mom, you're accusing a respected businessman of corruption from 30 years ago based on what? A conversation you overheard while cleaning his house? Do you hear how that sounds? I heard exactly how it sounded. I also heard what they weren't saying. How much? I asked quietly. What? How much is Gerald offering you? For the new development? The partnership? Whatever carrot he's dangling? Brandon's face went red. This isn't about money. Everything with the Morrisons is about money. I picked up my coffee mug. My hand's steady now. Get out. Mom, get out of my house. Both of you. Natalie grabbed her purse. You're making a huge mistake. My father has lawyers, Clara. Real lawyers. If you keep spreading lies about him, you'll lose everything. I'll take my chances. They left. The house felt bigger without them. Emptier. I sat down and opened my laptop. If they wanted to threaten me, fine. But I hadn't survived 4 decades in business by backing down from bullies. I spent the next 3 hours digging through my old files. I found the folder marked Morrison Payment, 1994. Inside, the cashier's check for $12,000, a handwritten receipt signed by Gerald, and a document titled Business Acquisition Agreement that said he was selling me a cleaning service client list and equipment. Except there was no client list. There was no equipment. There was just cash and a story. I photographed everything and uploaded it to a cloud drive. Then I called my lawyer, Ruth Chen, someone I'd worked with for 20 years. Ruth, I need advice. And I need it off the clock, at least for now. Clara, what's wrong? I told her everything. The dinner, the email, the threats. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Clara, this is serious. If Gerald Morrison is talking about competency evaluations, he's not bluffing. Men like him have resources. I know. But here's the thing. If he paid you $12,000 in 1994 for essentially nothing, and he's panicking about you mentioning it now, that means there's something real to hide. Something that could still hurt him. That's what I think too. Don't do anything yet. Let me do some research on Morrison and Sons. Any projects from that era. Any legal issues. And Clara? Don't engage with Brandon or Natalie until we know more. If they're working with Gerald, anything you say to them goes straight back to him. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my house and thought about Brandon, my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died, the boy I'd worked 3 jobs for, missed school plays for, sacrificed everything for. I remembered his 8th grade graduation. I'd been scheduled to work a huge office complex cleaning job that same evening, a job that would pay $3,500, enough to cover a third of the down payment on my first franchise. I'd told Brandon I'd make it to the ceremony, that I'd leave work early, that I wouldn't miss it. But the job ran long. A pipe had burst, water everywhere, and I was the supervisor. By the time I got to the school, the parking lot was empty. I found Brandon sitting alone on the front steps in his dress shirt and tie, waiting. Sorry, baby, I'd said, kneeling in front of him. I'm so sorry. He'd looked at me with those 12-year-old eyes. It's okay, Mom. I know you're working hard for us. That $3,500 had become my first franchise. That franchise had become 4. That hard work had paid for Brandon's college, his first car, the down payment on his first house. And now he stood in my living room, calling me paranoid. asking me to apologize to the people who looked down on me. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Clara, this is Julia. Brandon and Natalie's daughter. Can we talk? Please don't tell them I'm contacting you. It's important. Julia, my granddaughter. 16 years old, and I'd barely seen her since the wedding 3 years ago. Natalie had always made excuses. She's busy with school. She has plans. Maybe next time." I texted back, "Of course. When? Today? I can come to your house after school. Around 4? I'll be here." Whatever was happening in my family, whatever Gerald Morrison was planning, I had a feeling Julia knew something important. And for the first time since that disastrous dinner, I felt something other than anger. I felt hope. Julia arrived at 4:07 p.m. I watched her walk up my driveway from the window, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her head down. She looked so much like Brandon at that age. The same dark hair, the same way of walking like she was carrying the weight of the world. I opened the door before she could knock. "Grandma Clara." She fell into my arms and I felt her shaking. When she pulled back, her eyes were red. "Come in, sweetheart. I made hot chocolate." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed Brandon cereal before school, helped him with homework, listened to his teenage heartbreaks. Julia wrapped her hands around the mug and stared into it like she was reading tea leaves. "I'm sorry I haven't visited more," she said quietly. "Mom always has reasons why I can't. She says you're busy, or we're busy, or it's not a good time. I know, it's not your fault. It is, though. I'm 16. I could have just come anyway." She looked up at me. But I was scared. Scared of what? Of her, of disappointing her, of... She took a shaky breath. "Of proving I'm more like you than like them." The words hit me in the chest. "Julia, I heard them fighting last night. Mom and Dad. After the dinner with Grandpa Gerald. Mom was screaming about how you humiliated them, how you're trying to ruin their lives. Dad was crying." "Your father was crying?" She nodded. "I've never heard him cry before. He kept saying, 'She's my mom. She's my mom,' over and over. And Mom said," Julia's voice broke, "she said you were a poison, that you've always been jealous of their success, that you're a bitter old woman who can't stand to see them happy." I closed my eyes. Natalie's words from this morning were one thing, but knowing she'd said them to Brandon, that she'd broken him down enough to make him cry, that was something else. "Then Grandpa Gerald called," Julia continued. "And I listened from the stairs. He told Dad that you're dangerous, that you're making up stories about him, about some payment from decades ago. He said he's talked to his lawyers about getting you declared incompetent. I know. Your father showed me the email." Julia's eyes widened. "He showed you? But that means..." She set down her mug. "Grandma, Dad's choosing them. He's choosing Grandpa Gerald and Mom over you. I know that too, sweetheart." "But it's wrong." Her voice rose, passionate, angry. "Everything Mom says about you is a lie. You're not bitter. You're not jealous. You built a whole business from nothing. You raised Dad by yourself. You're the strongest person I know." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Thank you for saying that. I mean it. And I think..." She pulled something from her backpack, a small notebook with a worn cover. "I think you need to see this. It's Dad's journal. He doesn't know I have it." "Julia, I can't read your father's private..." "Please." She pushed it across the table. "He writes in it every night in his office. I found it last week when I was looking for printer paper. I wasn't trying to snoop, but I saw my name, so I read that page. And then I read more. And Grandma, you need to know what he really thinks." My hands trembled as I opened the notebook. Brandon's handwriting, the same messy scrawl from his school assignments. I flipped to a page marked with a sticky note. Julia had labeled it, "Read this." The entry was dated 3 weeks ago. "I don't know who I am anymore. Natalie wants me to ask Mom for money again. Another $15,000 for the vacation home renovation. But we both know there is no renovation. It's for Natalie's credit cards, her shopping, her endless need for more. I've already taken $85,000 from Mom's accounts over the past 2 years. Small amounts she hasn't noticed. $2,500 here, $4,000 there. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd pay her back when the Morrison deal comes through. But there is no Morrison deal. Gerald keeps promising partnership opportunities, development projects, but it's all conditional. After you prove yourself, after you handle the family situation, after your mother stops being a problem, I'm trapped. If I leave Natalie, I lose access to Gerald's world. If I stay, I lose myself. And I'm losing Mom either way. Julia asked me yesterday why we never visit Grandma Clara. I didn't have an answer, or I did, but I couldn't say it. Because your mother is ashamed of where I came from. Because your grandfather thinks my mom isn't good enough. Because I'm too weak to stand up for the woman who gave me everything. I miss her. I miss sitting in her kitchen talking about nothing. I miss the way she used to look at me, like I was someone worth being proud of. Now when she looks at me, I see disappointment. And I know I deserve it. Natalie says I need to get Mom under control. Those were her exact words, like Mom is a dog that needs training. I hate that I didn't defend her. I hate that I'm reading this instead of calling her. I hate who I've become. Julia is the only good thing left. She's smart, kind, real. She reminds me of Mom at that age, fierce and honest. I pray she never learns to lie as well as I have. I couldn't read anymore. I closed the notebook and pressed my palms against my eyes. He stole from you, Julia whispered. Mom made him do it, but he did it anyway. I'm so sorry, Grandma. It's not your fault. But it is my family, my parents. She was crying now. And it gets worse. Yesterday after you left, I heard Mom on the phone with someone. She was talking about you. She said, the old woman is becoming a problem. We need to accelerate the plan. Gerald's lawyer is drawing up the papers for a restraining order. We'll claim she's been harassing us, showing signs of dementia, making threats. Grandma, they're going to make it illegal for you to even contact us. A restraining order, based on lies. I thought about Gerald's email, about protective measures. They weren't just threatening me. They were building a case. There's something else, Julia said. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through photos. I took pictures of some documents in Grandpa Gerald's office last Christmas. I didn't know what they were then, but after last night, I looked at them again. She showed me the first photo. It was a property deed from 1994, Morrison and Sons Development, a building on Industrial Avenue in Waukegan, the same building from that party 30 years ago. Look at the date, Julia said, zooming in. The building had been sold in March 1995, 3 months after Gerald paid me $12,000. Now look at this. Another photo, a newspaper clipping from the Waukegan News-Sun, dated August 1995. Industrial building collapse, injures 3 workers. A warehouse on Industrial Avenue partially collapsed yesterday afternoon, injuring 3 construction workers. Initial reports suggest structural failure due to substandard materials and code violations. The building, owned by Morrison and Sons Development, was sold earlier this year. Investigators are reviewing permits and inspection records. My vision blurred. 3 people injured. A building that collapsed. And Gerald had sold it right after paying me to go away. He knew, I whispered. He knew the building was dangerous. That's what he was talking about that night. No one's going to check. He was hiding it. And then he sold it to someone else, Julia said. He let someone buy a building that was going to collapse. And when you heard him talking about it, he paid you off so you'd forget. But people got hurt. I know. Julia's voice was hard, older than 16. And now he's threatening you to protect himself. Because if this comes out, if people know he sold a dangerous building and covered it up, he could lose everything. His company, his reputation, maybe even face criminal charges. We sat in silence. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. A car drove past. Normal life continuing while my world fractured apart. Julia, why are you telling me this? She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. Because it's wrong. Because my mom is wrong, my dad is wrong, my grandpa is wrong. And because someone in this family needs to be brave enough to tell the truth. This could destroy your relationship with your parents. I know. But Grandma, they already destroyed it. Mom kicked me out last night. What? After the fight about you. I told her she was being cruel. I said you didn't deserve to be treated like that. She said I was choosing you over family. I said you are family. And she told me to pack a bag and stay with a friend until I adjusted my attitude. Julia laughed bitterly. I've been sleeping at my friend Emma's house. Her mom knows something's wrong, but I haven't told her what. I stood up and pulled Julia into my arms. She sobbed against my shoulder. This girl who'd been forced to choose between truth and comfort, who'd chosen truth. You'll stay here, I said, with me, for as long as you need. Mom will call the police. She'll say you kidnapped me. Let her try, you're 16. You can choose where you want to be. She'll use it against you. She'll say you're manipulating me, turning me against them. It'll prove you're unstable. She was right. Every move I made, they'd twist it. If I helped Julia, I was manipulating her. If I didn't help her, I was abandoning her. There was no winning. My phone rang. Ruth Chen, my lawyer. Clara, we need to talk. Now. I found something about Morrison and Sons, and it's bad. Really bad. Julia's here with me. Can I call you back in? No. Put me on speaker. If your granddaughter knows about Gerald Morrison, she needs to hear this too. I switched to speakerphone. Go ahead, Ruth. I pulled the records on that Industrial Avenue building. The collapse in 1995. 3 workers were injured, 1 permanently disabled. OSHA investigated. The report found multiple code violations, substandard materials, and evidence that inspections had been falsified. Falsified how? Someone had signed off on inspections that never happened. The inspector on record, a man named Tom Kowalski, died in a car accident in 1996. But before he died, he'd filed a complaint with the state claiming someone had forged his signature on Morrison and Sons permits. The complaint went nowhere. Morrison paid a $50,000 fine and moved on. And the people who were hurt? Settled out of court. NDAs all around. But here's the thing, Clara. Gerald Morrison still owns properties around Waukegan. Old buildings, cheap rentals, nothing glamorous. And some of them have the same inspection irregularities as that collapsed warehouse. Same inspector signatures, same permits, but the inspector is dead. Exactly. Which means either someone is forging a dead man's signature, or those buildings were never properly inspected at all. And if one of them fails, if someone gets hurt, Gerald goes down for it. I finished. Not just Gerald, Brandon too. I looked up the LLCs that own those properties. Brandon Hughes is listed as partner on 3 of them. If this blows up, your son is legally liable. Julia grabbed my hand. I felt the room tilting. Clara, are you there? I'm here. There's more. A restraining order was filed this morning. Natalie Morrison Hughes is claiming you've been sending threatening messages, showing up at their house uninvited, and exhibiting signs of severe mental distress. There's a hearing scheduled for Friday. If the judge grants it, you won't be able to contact Brandon, Natalie, or Julia for at least a year. But I haven't done any of that. I know, but they have text messages, photos, witnesses, or at least they claim to. We'll fight it, but Clara, this is coordinated. Gerald is using his daughter to shut you down legally while he covers up whatever he's hiding. I looked at Julia, this brave girl who'd risked everything to tell me the truth, who was now homeless because she'd defended me. Ruth, what if I have proof? Proof that Gerald knew about the building. Proof of the payment he made me. Documents, photos, everything. Then we have a chance. But Clara, if you go after Gerald Morrison, he will destroy you. He has unlimited resources, unlimited connections. Men like him don't lose. Maybe it's time one of them did. I hung up. Julia was watching me with wide eyes. Grandma, what are you going to do? I looked at Brandon's journal, at the photos on Julia's phone, at 3 decades of silence and shame. I'm going to fight back. Julia stayed with me that night. We ordered pizza and sat on my couch, her head on my shoulder, watching old movies neither of us paid attention to. Around midnight, her phone started buzzing. Text after text from Natalie. Where are you? Answer me right now. If you're with her, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. Your father is devastated. Come home. Julia turned off her phone without responding. You don't have to do this, I told her. You can go home. I'll understand. No. Her voice was firm. I'm done pretending. I'm done being part of their lies. We went to bed in separate rooms, but I didn't sleep. I lay in the darkness, thinking about Brandon's journal, about the building that collapsed, about Gerald Morrison's web of corruption that my son was now tangled in. At 3 a.m., I got up and went to my office, the spare bedroom where I kept 42 years of business records. File cabinets lined the walls, each drawer labeled by year. I opened the one marked 1994-1995 and pulled out the Morrison folder. Everything was there. The cashier's check, the receipt, the business acquisition agreement that was really a payoff. But I needed more. I needed proof of what Gerald had done, proof that would protect Brandon while exposing the truth. I opened my laptop and started searching. The Waukegan News-Sun archives, OSHA reports, county property records. At 6 a.m., Julia found me surrounded by printed documents, my eyes burning from hours of screen time. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked. "Couldn't." She looked at the papers spread across my desk. "What is all this?" "Evidence, but not enough." I rubbed my face. Gerald covered his tracks well. The inspector who could have testified is dead. The workers who were injured signed NDAs. The building records have been scrubbed clean. Julia sat down next to me. "What about the people who got hurt? Can't they talk now?" "Not without violating their settlements. They'd lose everything. So he just gets away with it." I thought about that, about justice and power, and how men like Gerald Morrison always seem to slip through the cracks. Then I remembered something. "Julia, you said you took photos of documents in Gerald's office. Were there any others? Anything else you saw?" She pulled out her phone and started scrolling. Tons of boring stuff. Files about properties, bank statements, letters from lawyers. I just took pictures of anything that looked old, thinking maybe. She stopped. Wait, there was something weird. She zoomed in on a photo. It was a filing cabinet drawer, open, with a label that read insurance claims, archived. "Can you make out any of the file names?" Julia expanded the image. "There's one that says Industrial Ave, 1995, sealed." My heart started pounding. Sealed. That means there's a file. Documents he kept. But why would he keep evidence against himself? Insurance companies require documentation for claims. If workers were injured in that collapse, there would have been a liability claim. Gerald would need records to prove he wasn't at fault or to negotiate the settlement. He couldn't destroy it completely without raising red flags. So how do we get it? I looked at my 16-year-old granddaughter, this girl who'd already sacrificed so much. "We don't. I'm not putting you at more risk." "Grandma, no. Julia, what you've already done is enough, more than enough." But she was shaking her head, that stubborn set to her jaw that reminded me so much of myself. "What if I told you I still have a key to Grandpa Gerald's house? Mom gave me one last year for emergencies. She never asked for it back." "Julia, that's breaking and entering." "Not if I have a key. And not if we go when everyone's at the Morrison and Sons annual charity gala this Saturday. It's the biggest event of the year. Grandpa Gerald, Grandma Linda, Mom, Dad, Uncle Ethan, everyone will be there from 6 p.m. to midnight. You're talking about burglary. I'm talking about getting the truth." Her eyes were fierce. "They're trying to get a restraining order against you based on lies. They're using fake evidence to paint you as crazy. We need real evidence to prove what Grandpa Gerald did. Otherwise, they win." I wanted to say no. Every parental instinct in me screamed to protect this girl, to keep her safe, to handle this myself. But she was right. Without that file, I had nothing but 30-year-old memories and a suspicious cash payment. With it, I had proof. "If we do this," I said slowly, "we do it smart. We document everything. We don't take anything, just photograph it. And if anything goes wrong, if anyone comes home early, you leave immediately and claim you forgot something. I'll take the blame. Deal." The week crawled by. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Ruth Chen prepared my defense, but we both knew it would be difficult without hard evidence to prove Gerald's motives. On Wednesday, Brandon called. I almost didn't answer. "Mom." His voice sounded hollow. "We need to talk about Julia. She's safe. She's with me. She needs to come home. Natalie is losing her mind." She's called the police twice, but they say Julia's old enough to choose where she stays. Then respect her choice. Mom, please. He was crying again. I know things are messed up. I know I've been weak, but she's my daughter. I miss her. You could visit her here. Silence. Then, you know I can't do that. Can't or won't. Don't do this. Don't make me choose. Brandon, you already chose. You chose Gerald's money and Natalie's approval over your own mother. Now Julia is choosing differently. She's a child. She doesn't understand the consequences. She understands perfectly. She sees what you refuse to see. He was quiet for a long moment. Mom, whatever you think you know about Gerald, whatever Julia told you, it's not what it seems. Gerald is a good man. He's helping us. The partnership he's offering, it could change our lives. At what cost? Why do you have to be so stubborn? Why can't you just apologize for what you said at dinner and move on? Because I told the truth. Your truth isn't always the truth. His voice rose, frustrated. You think Gerald is some corrupt developer, but you're wrong. That building collapse was an accident. The workers were compensated. The company paid its fines. It was 30 years ago, and you're trying to turn it into some conspiracy because you can't stand that I've moved on from your world. My world. Yes, the world of struggling, of barely getting by, of being ashamed of where you come from. I don't want that for my family. I don't want Julia growing up thinking that cleaning houses for rich people is something to be proud of. The words landed like physical blows. I see, I said quietly. And what should she be proud of? Lying? Stealing? Marrying into corruption? I'm done with this conversation. His voice went cold. And I'm done defending you to Natalie and Gerald. You want to fight them? Fine. But don't expect me to protect you when they destroy you. And don't expect Julia back until you come to your senses. He hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone, feeling something crack inside my chest. That was it. The final bridge burned. My son had chosen, and he hadn't chosen me. Julia appeared in the doorway. I heard. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. She came and sat next to me, taking my hand. I'm sorry, Grandma. He said your world was about being ashamed, about struggling. He's wrong. Is he? I looked at her. Maybe I did give him a childhood of struggling. Maybe I should have... Stop. Julia squeezed my hand hard. You gave him a childhood of love and honesty and hard work. You gave him every opportunity. What he does with that is on him, not you. Smart girl. Too smart for 16. Friday came. The hearing was in a courthouse in Waukegan, a gray building that smelled like floor wax and anxiety. Ruth met me outside with her briefcase and her game face. They're pushing hard, she warned me. Natalie's lawyer has 3 witnesses prepared to testify about your erratic behavior. They have screenshots of text messages you supposedly sent. I never sent her threatening texts. I know. But someone did, from a number they claim is yours. We'll argue it's fabricated, but without hard evidence. We walked into the courtroom. Natalie sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit. She didn't look at me. Behind her sat Gerald and Linda, and to my shock, Brandon, my son, sitting on their side. The judge was a tired-looking man in his 60s named Harmon. He reviewed the papers in front of him with the expression of someone who'd seen 1,000 family disputes and believed none of them. Ms. Hughes, he said, looking at Natalie. You're seeking a restraining order against your mother-in-law, Clara Hughes, correct? Yes, Your Honor. On what grounds? Natalie's lawyer stood. Mental instability, Your Honor. Harassment. Threatening behavior. My client has documented evidence of increasingly erratic and dangerous conduct. For the next 30 minutes, I sat and listened to lie after lie. Text messages I'd never sent, filled with rage and threats. Testimony from witnesses who claimed I'd shown up at Brandon and Natalie's house at midnight, banging on doors, screaming about Gerald Morrison, photos of a woman who looked vaguely like me lurking near their property. Brandon testified. He looked at his hands the whole time, never at me. My mother has always been strong-willed, he said. But recently, she's become paranoid. She makes wild accusations against my wife's family. She's pulled my daughter into her delusions. I'm concerned for everyone's safety. When Ruth cross-examined him, she asked one question. "Mr. Hughes, has your mother ever physically threatened you or your family?" "No, but has she ever been violent?" "No, but the psychological damage." "So your mother, who raised you alone, who worked multiple jobs to support you, who by all accounts has been a loving grandmother, is now suddenly dangerous because she questioned your father-in-law at a dinner party." "Objection," Natalie's lawyer said. "Argumentative." "Sustained," Judge Harmon said. But he was looking at Brandon thoughtfully. Then it was my turn. Ruth had me tell my side, calmly, methodically. The dinner, the payment from 1994, the building that collapsed, Gerald's threats. "Do you have proof of this payment?" Judge Harmon asked. I pulled out the folder. The cashier's check, the receipt, everything. The judge examined them carefully. "This proves Gerald Morrison gave you $12,000 30 years ago. It doesn't prove fraud." "No, Your Honor. But it proves motive. If Mr. Morrison is trying to silence me with this restraining order, it's because I know something he wants to keep hidden. Or," Natalie's lawyer interjected, "it proves that Ms. Hughes has constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory based on a legitimate business transaction from decades ago. This is exactly the kind of paranoid delusion her family is concerned about." Judge Harmon leaned back. "Here's my problem. I have a family dispute dressed up as a mental health crisis. I have accusations flying in both directions. I have a 30-year-old real estate deal and a collapsed building that was investigated and resolved by OSHA 3 decades ago." He looked at Natalie. "Ms. Hughes, I'm not convinced your mother-in-law represents a physical threat. These text messages could be faked. Your witnesses have clear bias. And frankly, family members showing up uninvited is called being annoying, not being dangerous." Natalie's face went red. "However," the judge continued, looking at me, "Ms. Clara Hughes, I'm also not convinced you're being entirely rational about Mr. Morrison. Without concrete evidence of current wrongdoing, these accusations appear inflammatory." He shuffled his papers. "I'm denying the restraining order, but I'm issuing a warning to both parties. Ms. Clara Hughes, you are not to contact the Morrison family directly. No surprise visits, no confrontations. If you have evidence of criminal activity, take it to the police. Ms. Natalie Hughes, if your mother-in-law genuinely threatens your safety, call the police. Don't weaponize the court system." He banged his gavel. "We're adjourned. I'd won, technically." But as I walked out of that courtroom and saw Brandon leave with Gerald without a single glance back at me, it didn't feel like winning. It felt like war. Ruth put a hand on my shoulder. "You've got until they try something else. Use the time wisely." I intended to. Because tomorrow night, Julia and I were going to get the evidence that would end this once and for all. That night, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I went to my bedroom closet and pulled out the box from the top shelf. Inside was the wedding photo of Tom and me, a few of his belongings, and one other thing, his father's lighter, a silver Zippo from 1952. I took the lighter downstairs to the kitchen. Julia was already asleep in the guest room. I pulled out Brandon and Natalie's wedding photo from my album, the one photo I'd kept from that day. They looked so happy. Brandon in his tux, Natalie in white, both of them smiling at a future they thought was golden. I held Tom's lighter, flipped it open, and watched the flames spring to life. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the photo, to my son, to the relationship we'd lost. Then I burned it. Not out of hatred, not out of revenge, but as a symbol. The old Clara, the one who stayed quiet, who accepted disrespect, who let her family walk over her to keep the peace, she was gone. What rose from those ashes was someone new, someone who fought back. Tomorrow, we'd get the proof, and then Gerald Morrison would learn that some secrets can't stay buried forever, especially when the person who knows them has nothing left to lose. Saturday night arrived with unseasonable cold. Julia and I sat in my car across the street from the Morrison estate, watching the last catering trucks leave. Through the iron gates, we could see the house blazing with lights. The annual Morrison and Sons Charity Gala was in full swing 3 miles away at the Lake Bluff Country Club. "They'll be there until at least 11, Julia said, checking her phone. "Mom posted on Instagram 15 minutes ago. She's wearing the Chanel dress, which means she's planning to stay late and network. I looked at my granddaughter in the darkness. Last chance to back out. Not a chance. She held up the key. Let's go. We drove through the gates, which Julia opened with a code she'd memorized. The house loomed above us, dark except for a few security lights. My heart hammered as we approached the front door. There's no alarm system, Julia whispered. Grandpa Gerald thinks the gates are enough. He's paranoid about technology, thinks someone could hack an alarm. The key turned smoothly. We stepped inside. The house was silent, cavernous. Our footsteps echoed on marble. Julia led me through hallways I'd only seen once before, during that terrible dinner. We climbed a curved staircase to the second floor, then down a corridor lined with family photos. Brandon's face smiled at me from several frames, frozen in happier times. Here. Julia stopped at a heavy wooden door. His office. The room was exactly what I'd expected. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, walls lined with bookshelves and filing cabinets. A massive desk dominated the center, its surface clear except for a laptop and a pen holder. The filing cabinets are over here. Julia moved to the left wall where 4 tall cabinets stood. She opened the second one, bottom drawer. Insurance claims, archived. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. Inside were dozens of manila folders, each labeled with property addresses and dates. Julia's fingers walked through them until she found it. Industrial Ave, 1995, sealed. The folder was thick, bulging with documents. I pulled it out with trembling hands and opened it on Gerald's desk. The first page was an OSHA report. Official, stamped, detailing the building collapse. 3 workers injured. Marcus Webb, age 34, fractured spine. David Chen, age 41, crushed leg requiring amputation below the knee. Sarah Kowalski, age 29, multiple fractures and internal injuries. Sarah Kowalski. Same last name as Tom Kowalski, the inspector who died in 1996. I flipped through more pages. Insurance claims totaling $2, $3 million. Settlement agreements. And then, buried in the middle of the stack, something that made my breath stop. A memo. Handwritten. Dated February 15th, 1995, 2 weeks before Gerald paid me off. Tom K. is asking questions about the Industrial Ave permits. He reviewed the structural reports and wants to know why his signature appears on inspections he claims he never conducted. Offered him $50,000 to let it go. He refused. Said his daughter Sarah works construction. Could have been in that building. He's threatening to go to the state licensing board. Options. 1. Increase offer. 2. Discredit him. 3. Wait it out. Decision. Waiting. If he pushes further, we'll handle accordingly. My hands shook. Julia, take pictures. Everything. She pulled out her phone and started photographing page after page. The OSHA report. The settlement agreements with their NDAs. The handwritten memo. Another document showing payments to someone named J. Morrison Consulting for $150,000. Dated March 1995. Memo line. Permit facilitation services. Who's J. Morrison? Julia asked. I don't know. Could be a relative. Someone Gerald paid to forge the inspector's signatures. We kept photographing. Then I found it. The smoking gun. It was a letter, dated April 1996, 1 month after Tom Kowalski's fatal car accident. It was from Gerald to his insurance company. Regarding the ongoing liability questions about Industrial Ave, I'm pleased to inform you that the primary witness, Inspector Thomas Kowalski, died in a traffic accident last month. With his death, the allegations of forged inspection signatures cannot be substantiated. I recommend we move forward with the settlements as planned, contingent on strict NDAs. The workers are desperate and will accept our terms. This matter can finally be closed. I stared at the words. With his death, the allegations cannot be substantiated. Grandma, Julia whispered, is he saying, I don't know what I'm saying. Mit. But I photographed it anyway. Then I saw the next document and my blood went cold. It was a police report. Tom Kowalski's accident. Single vehicle collision on Route 41, wet road conditions. Vehicle left the road at high speed. No witnesses. Investigation concluded as accidental death due to driver error. But clipped to it was something else. A mechanic's invoice from 2 days before the accident. Brake line inspection, no issues found, signed, Mike's Auto Service, and handwritten in the margin, in Gerald's writing, convenient timing. We need to go. My voice didn't sound like my own. We need to go right now. Wait, there's more. Julia, we have enough. We have more than enough. We put the folder back exactly as we'd found it, closed the cabinet, and turned to leave. That's when we heard it. The front door opening downstairs. Voices. Julia's face went white. They're home early. We could hear footsteps, multiple people. Linda's voice, sharp with irritation. I told you we should have stayed. Now everyone will think we left because of that reporter's questions about the old properties. Gerald's voice, lower, angrier. That reporter is a problem we need to handle. Someone's been feeding him information. They were coming upstairs. Julia grabbed my hand. The back staircase. Servants' stairs, this way. We ran as quietly as we could across the office. Julia opened a door I'd thought was a closet. Behind it was a narrow staircase, dark and steep. We plunged down, my hand on the wall, Julia's phone providing the only light. Behind us, we heard Gerald enter his office. Linda, I need to make some calls. This reporter has documents. Questions about Industrial Ave. Someone with access to old files has been talking. We reached the bottom. The staircase opened into a mudroom near the back of the house. Through a window, I could see our car, impossibly far away near the front gate. We can't get to the car without them seeing us, I whispered. The garden. We can cut through to the street. We slipped out the back door into the cold November night. The Morrison garden was an elaborate maze of hedges and fountains. We ran through it, my lungs burning, Julia pulling me along paths she'd learned as a child visiting her grandparents. Behind us, lights blazed on in the house. We heard shouting. Someone's been here. The office door is open. We burst through a back gate and onto the street. My car, I gasped. We have to get my car. Leave it. We'll get an Uber. No. All my documents are in the trunk. The Morrison folder, everything. Julia pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called for a ride. 3 minutes. We had to wait 3 minutes on a dark street while Gerald Morrison figured out someone had been in his files. Headlights swept the street. For one terrifying second, I thought it was Gerald, but it was a Toyota Camry with an Uber sticker. We dove in. Drive, Julia said. Please just drive. The driver, a young man with earbuds, shrugged and pulled away. Through the back window, I saw security lights blazing on at the Morrison estate. My car sat in the driveway, visible, identifiable, damning. Grandma? Your car? I know. We had the evidence. We had proof of Gerald's corruption, his possible involvement in Tom Kowalski's death, everything we needed. But Gerald would know someone had been in his office. And my car sitting in his driveway made it clear who. The driver dropped us at a 24-hour diner in Lake Forest. Julia and I sat in a booth, both of us shaking, while I called Ruth Chen. Clara, it's 9 p.m. on a Saturday. Ruth, I need you to listen. I have evidence, real evidence, about Gerald Morrison, the building collapse, everything. I told her about the files, the photos, the memo about Tom Kowalski. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Clara, how did you obtain this evidence? Does it matter? Yes. If you broke into his house, I didn't. Julia had a key. She's his granddaughter. She had permission to be there. Did she have permission to photograph confidential documents? I hadn't thought about that. Ruth, the man may have killed a state inspector. He definitely sold a building he knew was dangerous. People were hurt. One man lost his leg. I understand. But if this evidence is inadmissible, then I'll leak it to the press. That reporter who was asking Gerald questions tonight, I'll give him everything. Clara, Ruth, I'm done playing by rules that only protect men like Gerald Morrison. He threatened me. He turned my son against me. He kicked my granddaughter out of her home. He's been stealing from injured workers and taxpayers for 30 years. Someone needs to stop him. Ruth sighed. Send me the photos, all of them. Let me review what we have. And Clara, lawyer to client, off the record? Yes? Sometimes the people who deserve it most need to be taken down, even if it costs us something to do it. Send me everything. I sent the photos, all 147 of them. Julia and I sat in that diner for 2 hours, drinking coffee, waiting. At 11:30 p.m., my phone rang. Not Ruth. Brandon. I answered. Hello, Mom. His voice was tight, controlled. Where are you? Somewhere safe. Gerald's house was broken into tonight. His office was accessed. Files were photographed. My daughter's coat was found on the back stairs, and your car is still in the driveway. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, he was yelling now. I know it was you. I know Julia helped you. Do you have any idea what you've done? Gerald is calling the police right now. He's pressing charges for breaking and entering, theft of confidential documents. He can't report those documents to police without explaining what's in them. Silence. Then, what did you find? The truth. About the building collapse. About the inspector who died. About Gerald's corruption. You're insane. You've created this entire conspiracy in your head, and now you've dragged Julia into it. She's a child, Mom. You've turned her into a criminal. She's brave, something you stopped being a long time ago. I'm trying to protect this family. By selling your soul to a man who let 3 people get maimed because he cut corners on safety? By stealing $85,000 from your own mother? By testifying against me in court? Another silence. How did you know about the money? Your journal. Julia found it. I heard him make a choking sound. She went through my private things. She was looking for printer paper and found the truth. Brandon, Gerald Morrison forged inspection documents. A building collapsed. A man lost his leg. And when the inspector started asking questions, he died in a convenient car accident. That's insane. I have documents, memos, insurance claims, letters, all in Gerald's handwriting. And I'm going to the police, the press, whoever will listen. You'll destroy everything. My career, my marriage, my life with the Morrisons. I'm trying to save you. My voice cracked. You're listed as a partner on 3 of Gerald's properties. If this comes out and you're still tied to him, you could face charges too. But if you come forward now, if you cooperate with investigators, I'm not betraying Gerald, even if it means going to prison. He was crying. I could hear it. Why couldn't you just let it go? Why couldn't you just be proud I married up, that I got out of your world of struggle and poverty? Why did you have to ruin everything? Because some things are more important than money, like integrity, like truth, like not letting people get away with hurting others. You sound just like Dad, he said bitterly. Always so righteous, always so sure you're right. And where did it get him? He died broke, cleaning other people's messes. The words hit like a slap. Your father died honest. That's more than you can say. I'm done. His voice went cold. Gerald's lawyer is drawing up criminal complaints against you and Julia. You'll both be arrested. And when you are, don't call me. Don't expect me to bail you out. You made your choice. Live with it. He hung up. Julia was crying silently across the booth. I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm so sorry. I reached across and took her hand. You have nothing to be sorry for. I cost you your son. No, sweetheart. He cost himself his mother. My phone buzzed again. Ruth Chen. Clara, I've reviewed everything. We have enough to bring to the state's attorney. This is big. Really big. Gerald Morrison is looking at multiple felonies. Fraud, forgery, possibly manslaughter if we can prove he was involved in Tom Kowalski's death. What about Brandon? He's on those property LLCs. If he cooperates, testifies against Gerald, he might avoid prison. Community service, probation, fines. But Clara, he'd have to turn on Gerald completely. Testify, provide evidence, everything. He won't do it. Then he's going to prison. I closed my eyes. When? I'm calling the state's attorney Monday morning. They'll want to interview you, verify the documents, build a case. This is going to be public, messy, and brutal. The Morrisons will fight back with everything they have. Are you ready? I looked at Julia, this girl who'd given up her home, her parents, everything she knew to stand up for what was right. I thought about Tom, who'd died with integrity intact. I thought about all the Clara Hughes who'd come before this moment, who'd stayed quiet, who'd accepted disrespect, who'd let her family treat her like garbage because she was afraid of losing them. That Clara was gone. I'm ready, I said. Let's burn it all down. The state's attorney moved faster than I expected. By Tuesday morning, Gerald Morrison was arrested at his office. The charges: fraud, forgery, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The news went viral by noon. I watched the coverage from Ruth's office. Gerald in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his face a mask of rage, Linda screaming at reporters, Natalie hiding behind sunglasses, practically dragging Brandon to their car. "They're offering him a deal," Ruth said, hanging up her phone. 20 years, eligible for parole in 12 if he cooperates fully. Names everyone involved. Will he take it? Gerald Morrison? Never. Men like him think they're untouchable right up until the cell door closes. She was right. Gerald refused the deal. His trial was set for 6 months out, but the evidence was overwhelming. The documents we'd photographed, combined with testimony from the injured workers who were finally free of their NDAs, painted a damning picture. But the real bombshell came 2 weeks after Gerald's arrest. Brandon showed up at my door at 7 in the morning. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were hollow, his clothes wrinkled. "Can I come in?" His voice was barely a whisper. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals, where I'd helped him with homework, bandaged his scraped knees, listened to his dreams. "They're charging me too," he said. "The properties I'm partnered on with Gerald, they all have the same forged permits. The state's attorney says I'm complicit." "Are you?" "No, I swear, Mom, I didn't know. Gerald handled all the paperwork. I just signed where he told me to sign." He looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. "But they don't believe me. My lawyer says I'm looking at 5 to 7 years unless I cooperate, then cooperate. If I testify against Gerald, Natalie will leave me. She's already moved back in with Linda. She says I'm weak, that I'm betraying her family. And you care what she thinks?" He wiped his eyes. "I don't know anymore. Mom, I've been so lost. I read the articles about what Gerald did, about Tom Kowalski, about his daughter Sarah who got hurt in that collapse. I looked her up. She's still alive, living in Kenosha, still dealing with chronic pain from her injuries 30 years ago. I know. Gerald did that. He knew that building was dangerous and he sold it anyway. And when the inspector tried to stop him, Mom, do you really think Gerald killed him? I think Tom Kowalski died very conveniently for Gerald Morrison, and I think the police are investigating it now." Brandon put his head in his hands. "What have I done? I sold my soul for a partnership that was built on corruption. I stole from you. I testified against you in court. I called you paranoid when you were the only one telling the truth. I waited. Let him sit with it. Julia won't talk to me," he continued. "She's still staying with you, right?" "She is. Can I see her?" "That's up to her." He nodded. "I deserve that." He looked at me. "Mom, I know I don't deserve to ask this. I know I've been the worst son imaginable, but I need help. I need advice. What do I do?" This was the moment I'd been waiting for since that terrible dinner at the Morrison estate. My son finally asking for my guidance, finally admitting he'd been wrong. "You tell the truth," I said simply. "You testify against Gerald. You detail every shady deal, every forged document, every conversation you overheard. You give the prosecutors everything they need to put him away forever. But Natalie is using you. She always has been. Brandon, she married you because you were pliable, because her father could mold you into whatever he needed. She never loved you. She loved what you could be molded into. You don't know that. I know she kicked out your daughter for defending me. I know she helped Gerald try to have me declared incompetent. I know she's already living with her mother and hasn't visited you once since Gerald was arrested. What more evidence do you need?" He was quiet for a long time. "If I testify, I lose everything. The house, the cars, the lifestyle, all of it. But you keep your integrity. You keep your freedom, probably. And maybe you get your daughter back. And you? Do I get you back?" I thought about that. About 42 years of sacrifice. About missed school plays and worked double shifts. About raising him alone after Tom died. About teaching him right from wrong, only to watch him choose wrong anyway. "I don't know," I said honestly. "You hurt me, Brandon. Deeply. It's going to take time. But there's a chance?" "There's always a chance. If you're willing to do the work, real work, Not just the easy parts, he nodded. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. And he did. 3 months later, Brandon took the stand in Gerald Morrison's trial and detailed 30 years of corruption. The forged permits, the bribes, the shell companies. By the time he finished, Gerald's defense was in shambles. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Gerald Morrison was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. At 74, it was effectively a life sentence. Natalie filed for divorce the day the verdict came down. Brandon lost the house, the cars, everything. But the prosecutors reduced his charges to conspiracy, gave him 2 years probation and a $50,000 fine. I paid the fine. Not because he deserved it, but because sometimes love means helping people rebuild after they've destroyed everything. Julia moved back in with Brandon after the trial. They rented a small apartment in Lake Forest, nothing like the Morrison mansion, but honest. She visits me every Sunday. We make dinner together, talk about school, about her plans for college. Brandon comes too, though we're still rebuilding. It's awkward, careful, like learning to walk after a broken leg, but he's trying, really trying. Last week he brought me something, a deed, to the Industrial Avenue property where the building collapsed in 1995. I bought it, he said. It's been abandoned for decades, but I'm going to develop it properly. Everything up to code, everything transparent, and I'm naming it the Tom Kowalski Memorial Plaza. I cried. For the first time through all of this, I cried. There's more, he said. I tracked down Sarah Kowalski. She's agreed to consult on the project. We're also setting up a fund for injured workers, paid for by the property's profits. It won't undo what Gerald did, but maybe it'll help. I hugged my son for the first time in months. He felt thinner, humbler, but real. Finally real. As for me, I expanded my franchises. 2 more locations, both focused on hiring women over 50 who need second chances. I named them Tom's Cleaning Company. It makes me smile every time I see the signs. Linda Morrison tried to sue me for emotional distress from the break-in. The judge threw it out. Gerald's appeals have all failed. Natalie works as a receptionist now, her designer clothes sold to pay legal fees. And my car? Still in the Morrison driveway that night? Turns out Gerald had it towed and destroyed in a rage. I sued him for it. Won $35,000, bought a new Tesla. Tom would have loved that. Some nights I sit on my porch and think about the woman I was before that dinner. The woman who stayed quiet, who accepted disrespect, who thought keeping the peace was more important than keeping her dignity. She's gone now, and I don't miss her. Julia graduates high school next year. She wants to study law. So I can help people like you, Grandma, she said. People who get silenced by powerful men. I told her the world needs more lawyers like that. Brandon asked me last Sunday if I forgive him. I told him the truth. I'm working on it. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's a dimmer, slowly turning up over time. But we're getting there. Step by step, day by day. My name is Clara Hughes. I'm 68 years old. I built 4 cleaning franchises from nothing, survived corruption and betrayal, and learned that the most important person to fight for is yourself. Did you like my story? What would you do if your family demanded you hide who you really are? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And tell me, what city are you from? Let's connect. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Never too late to tell the truth. Never too late to start over. Because sometimes the price of silence is higher than the cost of speaking up. And some secrets are worth burning the world down to expose.